Good morning, everyone. It's Kirsten from COVA. I just had my network go out just about 4 minutes ago, so a little morning adrenaline dump. Thanks, y'all, for joining us. We are going to get right to it, but first I do want to let you know that this session is being recorded. This is a listen-only session, so you have questions for Greg and Mike. Go ahead and type them into the question/chat box and I'll help moderate those. If you're not familiar with GoToWebinar, it's a very minimized toolbox. So there is an orange box in the top right of your screen with a right-facing white arrow. If you click out on that, then you will see the chat/questions box. Click down on that. You can send me a message. You will receive an email a little later on today with credit for today's training or showing proof of attendance today. Please save that for your records. And if you're applying for COVA's Voluntary Victim Advocate Certification, submit it with your packet. If you're watching this presentation later on our YouTube channel, we hope that you find it informative. However, please note that archived webinars may not be used for COVA Victim Advocate Certification. And with that, I'm going to turn it right over to you, Greg. Thank you.
Great. Glad everybody can attend today. Mike, thanks for joining us. So my name is Greg Londo. I'm the CEO and founder of Valor Technical Cleaning, a biohazard cleaning business here in the state of Colorado. I've met many of you over the last year or two, so happy to be here today. Really, our intention is twofold. One, a close friend and classmate of mine from West Point, Mike Irwin, is here to join us, and we'll get into his bio a bit later, but we want to focus on really two items. One is really an awareness around suicides in the state of Colorado, and specifically around veteran suicides, and the things Mike and his team are doing to quell those. And then secondarily, Mike wrote a fantastic book called Lead Yourself First. And with everything that we all do and your volunteers do and all of you that are a member of COVA run into is really stressful situations. So we're going to spend some time on what I would deem self-care. So the concept of, what are the things that we are doing to take care of ourselves and also our teams. And Mike's done a wonderful job in his book to hit on a few things that I think are really valuable for that purpose. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of Valor, and then we're going to jump into both of those topics here shortly. So just by way of background, I mentioned Mike Irwin and I were classmates in the class of 2002 at West Point. After West Point, I spent a little bit of time in the Army as an infantry guy, and then did a number of leadership roles in corporate America before founding Valor. So enough about me, but just to, in 10 seconds or less, Valor Technical Cleaning does anything related to biohazard trauma cleanup. We do board ups, we do any type of hoarding or COVID type cleaning. And so just most of you already know what it is we do, but just wanted to hit on that briefly. And I've got a bio up for Mike, and I almost had to put it on 2 slides because he's done so much. But I'll hit on a few things and then ask you a few questions, Mike, about those. So since he graduated from West Point, Mike made his way through the Army and ended up as a special operator in the Army, meaning special forces leader. And since then, he's founded and was the CEO of the Character and Leadership Center, where he worked with many of the largest companies and most well thought of companies in the country. He wrote the book Lead Yourself First, and he's working on his second book. He served as a veteran in the Army, earning a couple of Bronze Stars. He did some graduate studies at the University of Michigan between 2009 and 2011. And what I really think is incredible is he focused on a degree that is essentially focused on positive psychology. And so we're going to hear a bit more about that from Mike today. He also, because he had a little extra time, founded a veteran-focused not-for-profit called Team Red, White, and Blue, which we'll hear a bit more about today, which he is currently the executive director for. And he also founded another not-for-profit called the Positivity Project, which essentially is helping our nation's youth build positive relationships and really focused on our schools across the country. And a number of other things. He's got a wonderful family, lives near Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and so we're so happy to have Mike here, with us today. So
and Greg, sorry, it's just kind of jump in a minute. I don't know if you can see, but you've got a box popped up that says reopen closed PDFs. If we can.
Oh, perfect. Is that
there we go.
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. So I'll set the stage on suicides and veteran suicides before we jump into Mike's perspective. But some of you have seen this slide before. We've done an analysis on suicide rates across by county. You can see the median or the state average is right around 20 per 100,000. And everything from the top at Park all the way down to the Phillips and the Yumas. As we looked at that data, we tried to find predictive trends, and we looked at things like per capita income and median family income. We looked at population density, a number of things. And for those of us that are math folks, we say, well, what is the R squared or the correlation between any of these things and suicides? And there were very few predictive sort of socio-demographic things that actually implicated it, except for one thing. The veterans as a percentage of Colorado's population are just short of 8%, but veteran suicides in the state of Colorado are close to 18%, which is pretty staggering. It's one of the only predictive measures that we can look at in the state for suicide. And so when we were thinking about this, I thought the best way to have a discussion around it would be to have Mike on and to spend a little bit of time talking about what he's done with Team Red, White, and Blue. And so I'll start it off, Mike, by sort of asking you, you look at what the Army talks about is VUCA, so volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So it's really the classic discussion around the fluidity and the dynamic nature of where we live today. And would you just give us a little bit of background on that topic and really how you got to the point where you founded Team Red, White, and Blue and why?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, great to be here, Greg. Awesome to see you. So a couple things. Back in 2010, I just finished my third deployment. And as you mentioned, I went to study positive psychology at Michigan. And a big part of what I was learning was about the role of relationships in life. Also studying about the role of consistent physical activity in life and how important those things are for not just our physical health, but our mental health. And so, there was already a significant increase in suicides in the veteran community that was happening. One of the things that most people are not fully aware of is that it really kind of spans the age span, but where a lot of times where suicide becomes very prevalent in the veteran community is age 50 to 65. And so there's a latency effect. And so a lot of people were really focused on, hey, how do we help these young men and women, 22, 25, 30 years old, from the mental health standpoint? But then there's also this idea that this is a long-term thing, the challenges that you face, because you might be okay in the transition in the first 5 years or 10, 15 years. But sometimes there's a latency effect when it comes to mental health and it comes to the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder and other things like that. So that's where a lot of my thinking was based on. When I was a grad student was, hey, how can we build something that can address these challenges for the long term? Because if you try to focus on it for a couple of years, you're just not really going to move the needle. It requires a sustained long-term commitment, and I see that right there, in your slide talking about, the desire to be able to serve. Like, this is what we need. We need organizations, businesses, nonprofits. Doesn't matter. Like, whoever you are, willing to be able to step up and commit to serve for the long term, and that's where the impact happens, is in the aggregate. Whether you're talking investing money or growing an organization, you can't have that big of an impact like in years 1 and 2, right? It's really over the long term that you get to have that bigger impact. So I just say one more quick thing, around positive psychology's application on this. There is a topic that most people have not heard of, but when they hear it, their ears perk up, and it's called post-traumatic growth, or PTG. PTG is the flip side of the coin of PTSD. In other words, a person can go through trauma, they can go through severe adversity, and not immediately, because you're not a robot, right? But over time, you can actually grow from that adversity. And self-awareness and knowing that this is possible is a really important message to bring to the world. Because a lot of times people get the message in their mind of, I'm broken forever. This is not like if you drop a glass on the ground and it breaks, you can't glue it back together. Like literally there's too many pieces, you're not gonna be able to do it. But a person can go through adversity and trauma, and over time they can piece themselves back together and actually piece themselves together and be stronger because of it. And it's just so important. And I studied this in grad school because it's a fundamental element of positive psychology, is how do we help more people get on that trajectory to know that they can grow from adversity, that even though it doesn't happen overnight, even though it doesn't happen without a lot of work and a lot of stress, that you can get back to a better place than where you were prior to the trauma.
So just so you know, Mike, by way of background, COVA is an organization that supports victims advocates and individual families across the state of Colorado. They help families at their most difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of at the point that many volunteers work with the team, so they have an incredible volunteer network across the state that they're leading and help to influence families. When you think about Team Red, White, and Blue, what are some of the things that the principles that you think, and through the Positivity Project, some of the principles that you've seen and used that have been successful that they can use with their teams that go through stressful situations, and also through impacting families at really stressful situations during their really times?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely difficult work, and I'm I know I speak on behalf of pretty much everybody who leans into this work, that our nation is extremely grateful for the service that you provide. My dad was a police officer on the Syracuse Police Department, and he was responsible for the child abuse department. And getting on the front lines and being able to work on behalf of victims, who are children, and the work is so important, and as we all know, it's never ending. I think the biggest things that I learned, when thinking about, from Team Red, White, and Blue, and then also just from the lens of positive psychology that sits at the foundation of the Positivity Project, right? There's not this idea of, some people have heard this phrase before, it's called toxic positivity. It's where you just tell people like, oh, it's all right, and you don't realize the complexity of their situation. And so I think the biggest thing that I've learned from, as I shared just a few minutes ago about post-traumatic growth, is helping people to know that while it might be difficult right now, that there is a better future. There is the growth that can happen, over time. And specifically, as it pertains to positive psychology, there are 24 character strengths that sit at the foundation of positive psychology, and these are everything like humility and fairness and forgiveness, to enthusiasm and kindness and love. Depending on who you're talking to, some people have a lot of exposure to people with character, and some people do not. But I'm a big believer in the power of using positive language in communications with people. And so sometimes we need to tell someone to stop doing something, like stop bragging. But a more effective way of saying it, we've seen, is to say, hey, show humility. It's a way of telling people to help them to see something positive versus stopping something negative. And so language does matter. And I tell this story all the time of my kindergarten teacher who saw leadership potential in me at the age of 6, and I didn't even know what leadership was. But there's power in language. And when people share positive language with others, it can transform their lives. You've probably heard the story before about Jim Carrey, the comedian who was just like a big clown, like in school, never paid attention, just got in trouble all the time until finally one teacher, I think his junior year, pulled him aside and said, "You're funny. Like you can make a life out of this. You can make a career out of this." And so you go someone who is constantly hearing you're bad, you're wrong, you're this, you're that, and putting him down, to saying you can do something with this, right? And so no matter what a person's weakness is, no matter what their vulnerability is, that can be turned into a strength, right? When you have the right language to help them see it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mike. I had never met you before when we were classmates, and I ran in the Army Navy track meet in 1999. And you may not even remember this, but inside the intranet, you actually sent me an email saying, "Hey, I saw your time," or "I saw you won the Army Navy meet. Congrats, that's incredible." So you're a guy that's lived it. I know for 20 some odd years or more. And so, the first time we ever interacted was actually in the same vein you're describing, which is incredible. So when you think about, and we deliberately made this sort of a very condensed timeline, but why don't you give an overview of what's going on in Team Red, White, and Blue, specifically in the state of Colorado? Because I know a lot of the folks and leaders that you have in the organization here, some of them served, some of them didn't serve, but it's vibrant and it's growing and it's active. So why don't you, in a couple of minutes, just describe what are the things, if folks did have interest in supporting the veteran community and others who serve in the state of Colorado, why don't you just give an overview of what's going on here in the state? And actually talk about the climbing endeavor that we're sponsoring as Valor Technical Cleaning next year. It might be a really interesting one to talk about as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, first up is, so we are about 230,000 members across the nation right now, organized into almost 200 chapters. I think we've got 3 or 4, maybe 5 chapters in Colorado. And the organization is really focused on forging a community that centers on health and wellness for veterans. And so we are 10 years old, which is crazy to think that we've been around for 10 years now, but you do not need to be a veteran to join and to get active. In fact, 31% of our members are not veterans. They could be civilians, who just know a veteran or who want to support veteran health and reintegration. It could be a military family member or spouse. There's all kinds of ways that people get involved, but a full 31% of our members, have not ever been in the military. We've got chapter-based events. Obviously, in the past year, they've been reduced, but we also, you can go right now to the App Store, take out your smartphone and download the Team Red, White, and Blue app. And it does 2 things. You can search for and find, based upon your geolocation, physical activity, events, and opportunities to link up with veterans wherever you're at. So there might be a yoga session at 6 o'clock at night somewhere. There might be a run at 7 a.m. At a local park or whatever. And then there's also national events that we do as an organization. So for example, in May, we have one coming up called Marching Orders. And Marching Orders is a challenge across a week to basically move 5,000 steps per day. And just to get out there and walk. Now, you don't got to run. You can hike, or you can walk, or you can run if you want, but just go out there and walk and move your body. We know that there's a positive correlation between once you get north of about 5,700 steps a day and mental health, right? And so one of the most accessible and affordable ways to improve your mental health when you're having a bad day or when things are not going well is to just get outside and go for a walk. Especially in the great state of Colorado where, it's so beautiful out. So we have marching orders, we have the 1776 challenge. We have all kinds of different events that you can participate in virtually as part of like our virtual community when you can't make it to any in-person activities and events. And then, to your point, Greg, we've got, some things called Eagle Expeditions that are coming up this year and then increasingly into the future. And these are essentially events where we're bringing veterans together to go out and to do bold things. It could be, rim to rim at the Grand Canyon, or fishing up in Alaska, or, a lot of it involves outdoors, a lot of it involves physical activity. But this is a part of our solution to help to address the mental health crisis in our country, and especially within the veteran community. We know that there's not a silver bullet solution, but that through consistent effort and through involvement with people who want to help veterans be healthier, and to know that their best days are not behind them when they were in uniform, but the best days, like for you, Greg, are in front of them. That's a message that we want more and more veterans to really believe and to know, even though it may not be easy to see that in the immediacy, of those first couple of years when you leave active duty.
It's great, and I think when the victims advocates across the state of Colorado, can run and do run into veterans, it seems like of all the veteran organizations that I've been adjacent to and supported over the years, I've really just have a personal experience with veterans have had a real positive experience here. So you can feel comfortable recommending Team Red, White, and Blue to any of the victims you run across who may be having any level of post-traumatic stress disorder or going through difficult times, in their lives.
Absolutely, 100%.
And when I think about sort of the last piece I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, Mike, is your book. Just so that the group knows, I've offered to give a free copy of Lead Yourself First to all of the victims advocates that are members of COVA that have interest. All you have to do is send me an email to my inbox. Some of you already have, and I wanted to get a full count before I ordered and sent them out. So if you have interest in Mike's book, I'm happy to provide you a copy because I feel so passionately about the importance of self-care with what it is you all do and what you grind out on every day. But I just thought I'd just spend a minute, Mike. Why don't you talk a bit about maybe the top principles in your book through the lens of self-care, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. So this book I started researching it alongside federal judge Ray Ketledge in 2010. We spent 6 years reading, interviewing people, analyzing, and then writing the book. The primary message is that when you're in a leadership position, and by the way, leadership is not this lofty thing that you must aspire to. We all have the capacity to be leaders. Because leadership boils down to influence. It's not about rank or position, and it can be about rank and position, but it's really about influence. When you think about the work that you do on a daily basis, from my lens of West Point in the Army, but then just as a scholar and a student of leadership, like your leaders with a capital L. And so when that happens, is you start to see yourself more as a leader. This notion of, well, there's a lot going on, and I'm going to take a lot on today. There's going to be a lot of stress in my life. Like, how do you prepare for that? And then how do you cope with that stress on the back end? And so the big driving point of the message is we interviewed and we profiled a lot of leaders and talk about the importance of stepping back from it all, stepping back from the noise. And it's completely normal in the information age today to be spending lots of time face-to-face with people on Zooms, on webinars, on phone calls. But we need a discipline, we need a practice in our lives where on a daily basis, just like we need to eat and drink water, where we need to step back from it all and to give the neurological processes in our brains, those billions of neurons that are firing back and forth all day long, we need to give them a chance to just rest and to put it down. Because we all know that, like, if you just keep working out, you can't just keep, pushing 225 pounds up. Eventually your muscles break down and you can't. Even the strongest person in the world can't keep, repping that amount of weight. Yet for our brains, we don't tend to think about that. We just keep, like eating more and more, like, more emails, more podcasts, more phone calls, more internet, more shows, more Netflix, more video games. Like, the list goes on and on and on. More news, more shopping. We do all this stuff online. And while a lot of it has made it more convenient and it's made it great, it also has really come to this point of making it very easy to be overwhelmed and to feel a sense of overwhelm in that 6-inch space in between our ears. And so the big point of the message of the book is, like, prioritize stepping back, putting down the phone, walking away from the computer, getting outside, leaving the phone, driving somewhere with the radio off, giving yourself that time in the shower, or when you wake up in the morning, when you pray, when you meditate, like when you just sit there and you watch a sunrise, give yourself that time, because if you're not careful, you find yourself all day long in the information age just consuming more and more and more. And while it might feel like you're being productive, you're actually hurting your productivity, and you set yourself up to be less resilient in the face of the stress that you're going to take on in the day. And so the final thing I'd say to it, Greg, is the book doesn't get into tons of the details, but the most important message I share with people on this now is the morning routine. How do you start your day? You know, do you start your day with your alarm clock going off, and then you spend the first 20 or 30 minutes of the day in bed reading your emails, reading the news, reading your social media feeds? I beg you to not do that, right? Like, it's the idea of start your day on the offensive in a healthy way. Drink some water. You know, don't look at, you can't control like everything coming through your phone in the first 30 minutes that you're awake. So set an intentional routine in the morning where you don't have the input from your phone or from, you know, television or things like that, and just give yourself that space to start the day on your terms, because the rest of the day is going to come at you, and there's a lot of things that you can't control, but you can control, hopefully, the better part of that morning. And so again, that's like a big part of the book, is saying, like, before you can go out there and be effective for other people, you've got to be effective for yourself first.
Well, I'll tell you, we appreciate your insight. You know, it's interesting. There are two books that I really, and maybe are my top 20 that I've ever read. Henry David Thoreau wrote the book, you know, Walden Pond. It's all about peace and solitude. Really translated. I remember when I read your book, I couldn't help but think of when I was a kid and I read that book, the importance of being quiet, being still, being, you know, whatever it is. And I, you know, since your book, I've implemented some of those practices. But we're just appreciative for what you do for veterans, Mike. Thank you. We're looking at doing a volunteer appreciation event this fall for the volunteers for all of the jurisdictions across the state of Colorado, for folks to come in, and we're going to do an appreciation event. I'm going to hit you with this. I'm hoping you can join us this fall, actually, at that. And so more details to come on that, but we'd just like to offer it up to all these folks that show up with no pay to do this for the benefit of their communities, and we'd love for you to join us at that. And so in closing, again, my email address is glondo@valortechnicalcleaning.com. Kirsten can send that out in the wake of this. Happy to provide you with a copy of the book in the wake of this discussion. And with that, I'll sort of open it up to the extent there's questions or comments. We're happy to take those. I don't know how to do that, Kirsten, but if you could, that would be great.
They're coming through to me, so I have a thank you. I got to thank you for what you do. Greg, I know that you spoke briefly at the last law enforcement coordinators meeting, and we spoke about not duplicating too much with this, but there are some folks on who weren't, you know, on that or weren't on that list. Will you just mention your kind of service area in Colorado and what you've told us about suicide cleanup scenes for uninsured veterans, and what kind of paperwork, if a victim advocate is working with a family where there's been a veteran suicide, what does that look like and what paperwork do they need?
Yeah, no doubt. So if there is an uninsured veteran suicide that needs biohazard cleanup, Valor Technical Cleaning is doing all of those on a pro bono basis, and we'll continue to do that in perpetuity. The one thing we need is the deceased DD-214. Mike, remember, help me, DD-214?
Yeah, that's correct.
Defense 214 form, which everybody that gets out of the military and is a veteran gets a copy of the DD-214. And so that's, or any other simple proof of veteran, you know, that they served in conjunction. We don't make it all that onerous. We typically take people at their word. So that's important to know. If they are insured, we typically would make a claim against the insurance, of course, because as we know, 18% of all the suicides in the state of Colorado are veterans, and we're in business. But so that's the deal. Our service area is pretty much the entire state of Colorado. Our response time varies. We do have teammates in Montrose, Grand Junction, Pueblo, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, and then our headquarters is in South Denver. So we support the entire metro area as well. So in the Front Range, very quick response time. And if we're in the southwest part of the state, we'll get there. It just may take us a little bit. 24/7, 24/7 response, at any point. And so go to valortechnicalcleaning.com, and it's got our 24-hour, 24/7 number. It's tracked and monitored every day, all day. And we also do board ups for areas that we can support where our folks are. So we're not necessarily going to drive 3-4 hours to do board ups, but definitively in the metropolitan area, we'll do 24/7 board ups as well, just to make sure families are secure and safe for that as well. So, Kirsten, is there anything I missed that you can think of?
No, I think that's great, Greg. Thanks. And I know some of the coordinators have had the chance, like I said, to chat with you already. So we're just getting, I'm not really seeing any questions, just getting some folks saying thank you so much for this and thanks for the information. Greg's email is in the chat, and as well as the Valor Technical Cleaning website. Is Team Red, White, and Blue, just as it would suggest, teamrwb.com, or I can go ahead and put that in the chat before we end here.
Yeah, teamrwb.org. Yep.
.org. All right.
Correct.
Wonderful. We're appreciative. I'll say this at the end. We're so appreciative for what you all do every single day. And, to the extent there's anything we can do to help or support, please don't hesitate to reach out. And Mike, great to see your face. And thank you for today, my friend.
And we have, for Greg and Mike, Stewart says, go Army, beat Navy. And as a former Army wife, I can get on board with that. Thanks, you guys.
You like that. Thank you all. Make it a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.